Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope you are all doing well. So today we're going to be reading from Samyutta Nikaya 12.23. And this is a translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And it's translated as proximate cause. And proximate cause is essentially the cause right before the preceding effect or the succeeding effect. So in this case, it's going to discuss the links of dependent origination, but it's also going to be talking about the transcendental dependent origination, which arises with suffering as the initial cause. And the way the Buddha is going to explain it, he's going to do it in the reverse order first. So you understand the end of the path, the end of the transcendental dependent origination, and then he will walk you all the way back to suffering, and then from there take you back through the links of dependent origination all the way to ignorance. Now, this isn't the only Upanisa Sutta, which is the original name for it. There are 3 other Upanisa Suttas, one after another in Anguttara Nikaya 11, I believe. And they're very similar in nature with just one difference, where here it's related to the link of faith, which is the starting point from which the transcendental dependent origination starts. And in the other Upanisa Suttas, there it's in reference to sila, in reference to maintaining one's precepts as the starting point. So with that preface, let me start reading, and I will explain as I continue reading. At Savatthi, Bhikkhus, I say that the destruction of the taints is for one who knows and sees, not for one who does not know and does not see. So here he's talking about the entrance into arhatship. One becomes an arhat when the taints are destroyed. So he says, for one who knows what, for one who sees what, does the destruction of the taints come about. Such is form, such its origin, such its passing away. Such is feeling, such its origin, such its passing away. Such is perception, such its origin, such its passing away. Such are volitional formations, such are their origin, and such are their passing away. Such is consciousness, such its origin, such its passing away. It is for one who knows thus, for one who sees thus, that the destruction of the taints come about. So here the Buddha is referring to the 5 aggregates. This is also in reference to in the Digha Nikaya, where we have a recollection of the Vipassi Buddha, who goes through the different links of dependent origination. And at the very end, he then contemplates. And to contemplate is to just observe the arising and passing away without any involvement of each of the 5 aggregates. And in seeing that, there was insight into the impermanence of each of the 5 aggregates. And what is impermanent should not be worth holding on to, because it is a cause for suffering. And whatever is a cause for suffering should not be accepted as personal self. So it's the insight into the 3 characteristics of the 5 aggregates. And so one no longer clings or craves through those 5 aggregates. And because of no clinging, because of no craving, there are no more taints for that craving to arise. Because there's no more identifying with those aggregates, there is no more of the taint of being, of identity view, or bhava asava, as they say. And because one has seen the three characteristics and one has understood the Four Noble Truths, there is no more of the taint of ignorance either. So because of that, then there is the destruction of the taints and the realization of arahatship. And then he says, I say, bhikkhus, that the knowledge of destruction in regard to destruction has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. So the knowledge of destruction in regard to destruction, which means that once one attains nibbana and attains arahatship, there is a reviewing process of the mind that reflects back on what occurred, and there is the knowledge that the taints have been destroyed. Now, what is the cause of that? And he says, and what is the proximate cause for the knowledge of destruction? It should be said, liberation. So liberation here is in reference to the actual emancipation of the mind through the experience of nibbana. So the experience of nibbana is after having come out of cessation of perception and feeling, the mind experiences this seeing into the links of dependent origination. And it sees it without any involvement. And the experience of the relief of the mind having made contact with the nibbana element is not identified with. And so there's total liberation of mind, because in nowhere in that process is the mind clinging to it or craving for it. I say, bhikkhus, that liberation too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for liberation? It should be said, dispassion. So dispassion here is viraga, or vairagya in Sanskrit. And that can also be understood as detachment. This arises when one is taking quiet mind as the object in the 8th jhana. And one experiences a very deep sense of disenchantment, as we'll see later on. But that gives rise to dispassion. And this dispassion basically does not take anything as an object of interest for the mind. The mind is no longer bothered by and is no longer attached to or looking for any movement of the mind. So any formations that arise in the way of the mind is not considered in terms of its attention to it. It just passes away without any interest, without any attachment to it. So this detachment, this non-attachment to it is what arises. I say, bhikkhus, that dispassion too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for dispassion? It should be said, revulsion. Now, this is the translation that Bhikkhu Bodhi chose to use. The original Pali is nibbida, and one of the other translations for that word is disenchantment. So as you're getting deeper into the 8th jhana, and as your mind becomes more and more still, and it's with the object of meditation, which is the quiet mind, it's no longer interested, as I said, with disenchantment, with the formations that arise. And because of that non-attention, those formations just dissipate because of the lack of attention. And this disenchantment it can be likened to seeing that nothing here is worth holding on to. It arises due to the fact that you see that all formations are impermanent and not worth holding on to, and therefore not self. It can be likened to when you eat your favorite meal, for example, and at first you have craving for it, let's say, and you start eating it, and then you have another serving of it, and then you have another serving of it. At a certain point, you just get sick and tired of it. It just becomes something you don't want to see anymore. And of course, that's on a physical level, but here we're talking in the mental process where your mind has just become unbothered and no longer interested with the formations. It has become content with just staying with that quiet mind. I say, bhikkhus, that revulsion too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for revulsion? It should be said the knowledge and vision of things as they really are. So now what we're going to see is the intertwining of the 7 factors of enlightenment within this transcendental dependent origination. The knowledge and vision of things as they really are is known as Yata Buddha Jnana Dasana, which means basically seeing reality as it is. And this arises due to equanimity. So this equanimity is really the mind that remains undisturbed and is just able to see things clearly. It has no craving or attachment towards one element or another, and neither does it have any sense of aversion towards another element. It's just watching reality, observing it without any involvement, and just seeing things as they arise and as they pass away. This happens especially in the 6th arupa jhana. So in the 6th jhana, or the ayatana of infinite consciousness, if you have experienced that, you will see that you start to see the arising and passing away of different consciousnesses. And after a while, it gets tiresome. After a while, the mind no longer is interested in it, but it's just watching it without any involvement, without any attachment, or without any aversion. This is seeing reality as it is. You're seeing the arising and passing away of consciousness. And that disenchantment that arises is having seen that this process is impersonal. There's no controller. So you're no longer interested in it because it just becomes tiresome. It becomes boring. So that deepens into that disenchantment. So that equanimity that arises because of seeing that happens in the level of nothingness. And then that deepens into that disenchantment. I say, bhikkhus, that the knowledge and vision of things as they really are too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for the knowledge and vision of things as they really are? It should be said collectedness. So this is the enlightenment factor of collectedness that arises when one gets into jhana, when one starts to experience mindfulness and then gets deeper into the process of samadhi. And this samadhi is a mind that is unified around its object. The more it becomes unified with its object, that doesn't mean that it identifies with it or it becomes absorbed in it, but is just watching it, allows the mind to be unified around it. It starts to just see things as they really are without any involvement. So that means if a hindrance arises, that is just the truth of that moment. That is the reality of the situation. Because of that collected mind, you were able to see it and then use the 6R process to recognize it, to release your attention away from it, to relax the tension that arose from it, to come back to the smile, and then come back to your object of meditation, and then repeat whenever necessary. So this is really samadhi, which is the unified attention. I say, bhikkhus, that collectedness too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for collectedness? It should be said happiness. So this is translated from the word sukha, which is this sense of comfort and ease that happens in the mind. This is a factor of especially the first 3 jhanas. What is more prevalent in the first 2 jhanas is piti, as we'll see. And piti is that rapture or that intense joy, that excited form of joy that arises. And it's also an enlightenment factor, as we'll see. But then along with that is sukha, which is this happiness, which is this pleasant feeling of mind. It's just this comfort and ease of the body and of the mind. The mind has this wonderful sense of well-being, that everything is all right and it's very tranquil. So because of that, there is that sukha. I say, bhikkhus, that happiness too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for happiness? It should be said tranquility. So this tranquility is the enlightenment factor of tranquility. And this is passaddhi in Pali. And this is a mind that has been tranquilized, or the formations have been tranquilized in the mind through the repeated process of the 6 R's. Every time you do the 6 R's and stay with that relaxed step, you're experiencing the tranquilizing of formations, tranquilizing of the formations that had arisen and given rise to the hindrances. When you let go of your attention to the hindrances and then relax the tension, you're relaxing the formations, you're tranquilizing the formations related to those hindrances. And then you're replacing that with your smile, which brings about that happiness and that joy, the factor of piti, or joy. And so you are basically letting go of the unwholesome and replacing it with the wholesome. And that delineation point is the relaxed step. When you relax, this is what you're doing. You are letting go of those formations, and you are replacing those formations with formations that are rooted in happiness, rooted in joy, rooted in wholesomeness. I say, bhikkhus, that tranquility too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for tranquility? It should be said, rapture. So this is piti, this is the joy that one feels, the enlightenment factor of joy. And of course, as I mentioned, you experience that joy in the first and second jhana, and then that starts to dissipate. But the mind now is coming to balance and tranquilized and come into a more relaxed, comfortable state of being in the third jhana. So you're essentially in this path of transcendental dependent origination, starting to activate and then bring into balance the enlightenment factors, and you start to play with them on a very minuscule scale, on a very micro level, at the 8th jhana, whenever you see that the mind starts to lean towards one way or another in terms of restlessness or sloth and torpor. So now that this joy is experienced, it naturally gives rise to the feeling of tranquility that's there in the 3rd jhana, and that feeling of happiness that arises from that tranquility. Now, if you notice with the 6R process, you have first the recognize. So you're using a mindfulness to recognize. You let go your attention from that, and then you bring back your awareness to the mind and body and relax. Or if you're in a higher state, you just bring it back to the mind and just let go, relax, and come back. Here, when you're tranquilizing the formations, there's tranquility first, and then there's this natural happiness and a natural joy that arises from that smile. That smile is the anchor for that joy to arise. So that means that there's an interconnection between joy and tranquility. The joy can arise and then give rise to tranquility, or the tranquility can rise and give rise to joy. It can happen either way, but ultimately they will lead to a more tranquil state, and then finally a more collected state of mind through samadhi. I say, bhikkhus, that rapture too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for rapture? It should be said, gladness. Now, this gladness is translated from the Pali pamoja, and that comes from the Sanskrit pramoda. And pramoja is essentially this happiness born from practicing, this happiness and this joyful interest in the Dhamma, this joyful interest in the path after having learned about the path and wanting to follow the path. So it's something that is innate and arises as a result of following the precepts, as a result of following sila, which gives natural rise to samadhi. And now the Buddha will talk about the cause of gladness. He says, I say, bhikkhus, that gladness too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for gladness? It should be said, faith. Now, faith is translated from the Pali word Sādhu, which is from the Sanskrit shraddha. And Sādhu can be understood as conviction as well. And this faith is dependent upon the willingness to learn. It's, of course, arisen because of a few things. Number one, through suffering. When one has suffered enough, as you'll see in the next passage, there is this search for something to lead one out of the suffering. It is that samvega. Samvega is what was experienced by the Buddha when he was a bodhisattva. And he had come across the knowledge or the seeing of old age and death and so on, and then ultimately had the spiritual urgency to go on a path towards liberation, to find a way out of suffering. Here, it can be understood that samvega is when you suffer, there is something in your mind that says, I don't want to suffer anymore. I need to find a way out. This wanting to find a way out is chanda, is cultivated intention. This gives rise, this is arisen because of that samvega. Then that gives rise to a willingness to learn and understand. And that could be an action one takes on searching on the internet, searching on YouTube for something that could provide you peace of mind, whether it's the videos that you see on YouTube or meditation practice or whatever it might be, but in some way you are introduced to the Dhamma. And so you have this mindfulness of this is the Dhamma. Then you have the investigation into what is the Dhamma. This is not blind faith. This is conviction that is born from seeing the effectiveness of practicing the Dhamma. You have a willingness to learn, a willingness to practice the path, and then start to experience the effects of the path, start to experience the effects of having maintained the precepts and having started to meditate and so on. And so that becomes conviction. There's a deeper level of conviction when one actually goes into stream entry and no longer has any doubt in the practice, and that's deeper conviction. Now, in this whole process of letting go of that doubt, there is this process of making effort to do so. So it's not just allowing the mind to be in suffering, but you're taking initiative. So this faith is also dependent upon the right effort, dependent upon making the effort to want to learn about the Dhamma, practice the Dhamma, and ultimately gain wisdom from the Dhamma. So this is really the starting point of the transcendental dependent origination. Now the Buddha is going to talk about dependent origination as we know it in relation to how samsara, this wheel of samsara is mechanized through the links of dependent origination. So now he says, I say, bhikkhus, that faith too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for faith? It should be said, suffering. So there are different definitions for suffering, but as we'll see, suffering here is the mental suffering that arises, the physical suffering that arises in form of bodily pain, illness, disease, old age, the physical decay of the body as one ages, and so on. And one of the shorthand for suffering is understanding that the five aggregates, the five clinging aggregates, or the five aggregates subject to clinging, in short, are suffering. Meaning suffering can be experienced through one or more of these five aggregates when there is clinging and craving involved. And so then he says, I say, bhikkhus, that suffering too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for suffering? It should be said, birth or rebirth. Now, there are a couple of ways of understanding rebirth. Number one is the macro level. where one takes rebirth over and over in samsara and experiences the effects of one's actions in previous lifetimes, in previous lives, through the formations that take root in the next life. And so there is this rebirth, and one continues to experience until one has the wisdom to see it and let go of it and attain arahatship. On a micro level, there is the rebirth of that definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. So rebirth in that sense is one does not learn through wisdom and mindfulness and observation, practicing right effort, practicing 6 R's, to be able to see whenever an unwholesome state of mind arises, to see whenever the mind starts to personalize and identify with something. This gives rise to the other links when it comes to the level of, as we'll see, the level of feeling, where one has an experience through one or more of the 5 physical senses, or a mental experience. One then perceives that to be pleasant or unpleasant, and then attaches a self to it and says, I like it, or I don't like it, or just identifies with it, that I am this, causing one to have craving for that experience. And then that gives rise to clinging and so on, as we'll see. But the whole point here is to understand that rebirth in the micro level is rebirth of action, rebirth of speech, rebirth of intention and thought, having the same kind of thinking patterns and expecting it to be different. And then having suffering because of that, the mental suffering that arises because you expect something that doesn't happen the way you expected it to be. Or you have some form of craving for the body and it doesn't come out the way you want it, in whatever way it might be. And then there is also physical and mental suffering. So this birth is in reference to, one, the birth in samsara, and second, the rebirth that happens in the way of rebirth of the 5 aggregates, arising and passing away, and in that process identifying with them and identifying with that action, so that that causes new karma, and that new karma then gives rise to suffering and the effects of that karma that one has to experience in the next moment, or in the next succeeding moments or days or weeks or whatever it might be. And then he says, I say, bhikkhus, that birth too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for birth? It should be said, existence. So this is translated in many different ways. This comes from the word bhava. It can mean habitual tendencies. It can mean existence. It can mean being. It can mean identity, whatever it might be. But this is really where the sense of self is most prominent. And from here, then the birth of action arises. And this sense of self is built up through these tendencies, these underlying tendencies. There's the underlying tendency towards craving or liking for something. There's the underlying tendency for having aversion towards something. There's the underlying tendency for different views. There's the underlying tendency for doubt to arise. There's the underlying tendency for conceit to arise. There's the underlying tendency for ignorance to arise and for being to arise, that sense of identity, that I am this. So from there you are acting. For example, you might have the identity view that, I am a Buddhist, or I follow this practice, and there's attachment to that. Or I am following the 6 R's, or I'm experiencing this jhana, and so on. It can be the experience of identifying with that, causing one to not experience anything further in the way of letting go of attachment. So one has to be aware of this. One has to be mindful of seeing whenever there is attachment or identification going on with any of these processes, which gives rise to this identity, and from which this identity one acts. Whenever one acts from this sense of identity, is a sense of personalizing self, there will be new karma that needs to be played out, and the effects of which that need to be experienced in the next set of choices. And so he says, I say, bhikkhus, that existence too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for existence? It should be said, clinging. So there are different types of clinging here. So now in being, there was this concrete sense of self from which one acts. And it's made up of all of these different tendencies, as I mentioned. And then these tendencies are given rise by the clinging for the different types of clinging. There's the clinging to rites and rituals. There's the clinging to views. There's the clinging to sensual or mental experiences. There's the clinging to self-view. So these different types of clinging then give rise to the different tendencies, habitual tendencies, which create that sense of being, of bhava. And the different kinds of clinging here with regards to rites and rituals, it is the clinging to rites and rituals in terms of not only having that idea that this rite and ritual will give rise to nibbana or the experience of nibbana, but also to certain routines and to certain rites and rituals that one believes will be effective. It's this attachment and identifying with them that one needs to understand and let go of. The clinging to views is in relation to the two different types of views, traditionally speaking, the view of eternalism and the view of annihilationism. The view of eternalism talks about that there is this underlying, abiding, permanent sense of self that will continue on after the dissolution of the body. And it is the same sense of self that gives rise to different bodies, gives rise to different births. So it's the same Atman. The annihilationist view is that there is only self tied to the body and then it dissipates along with the body. So it's equated with the four great elements and the other aspects that make up the body, and then it dissolves along with the mentality and materiality. But in both cases, there is this sense of self arising because of it. But the Buddha says that the middle way is to understand it through dependent origination, how the sense of self arises in every passing moment through the five aggregates and through the links of dependent origination. When one understands this, then one sees that there is no permanent self to cling to. So that goes into clinging to self-view, clinging to the idea that one or more of the aggregates, or the aggregates in general, are identified with a sense of self, or originate from a sense of self, or the sense of self belongs to them, or there's the four different types of view in relation to each of them. So there's the five aggregates identifying in the same way as the self. There's the view that the five aggregates are originating from the sense of self. There's a view that the five aggregates give rise to the self, and there's the view that the self is separate from the five aggregates. So these different types of view, self-view, is the clinging that arises when one takes personal in one way or another in relation to these views regarding any of the experiences that arise from the five aggregates. And then the clinging to sensual experiences or mental experiences arises when there's craving. So it arises whenever there is some kind of experience that you have. For example, you go to a restaurant and you eat your favorite food, or you eat some kind of food and then immediately you enjoy it and you really like the taste of that food, the aroma of that food, and you start to create this identification process around the food. Now in your mind, it's this idea that that food is now your favorite. So now you're clinging to that experience of having that food again at a future time, and it's become part of your identity. And it can be related to your favorite smell. It could be related to your favorite color, or whatever it might be. It could be related to nostalgia of beautiful memories you have of in the past. It can also be related to things that you hold on to in the way of terrible memories, where you create this identity of being helpless because of those memories, being the person you are now because of those memories. And so there is still this attachment to those memories. And that clinging to that experience is what gives rise to that identity that is connected to those memories. So then he says, I say, bhikkhus, that clinging to has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for clinging? It should be said, craving. I say, bhikkhus, that okay, so let's go with craving. So now craving is of three types. There is the I want this, I don't like this, or I like this and I want this. I don't like this and I don't want this, or I am this. And this arises because of personalizing in some way the experience one has. So that experience that one feels or has the experience of through the link of feeling. You see, there is, as we'll talk about now, there is the level of feeling, which is just a bare sensation. Then the perception that this is pleasant or unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant, is that perception that arises, that is tied to that feeling. When it is pleasant and the mind attaches to it, it craves more for that experience. When it is unpleasant, it doesn't want more of that, and it tries to go away from that experience. It's not happy with the present moment of that experience. Or if it's neutral, there is this clinging of identity around it, that I am experiencing this. This I am experiencing this can happen also in the process of jhana. Whenever you have experienced that I am radiating loving kindness, or I am experiencing compassion, this I am starts to create this identification process with the Brahmavihara, as well as the different factors of the jhana. So to let go of that, one should just observe how loving kindness arises in the mind, and just watch, like an impersonal scientist through a microscope, how the loving kindness arises, or how the compassion arises and radiates. So your only duty here, so to speak, is just to watch without any identification. Anytime you see that the mind is attaching to that I am process within the jhana, pull back, let go of that, 6R that, and just watch, like you're in a movie theater and you're just watching the jhanas go by. You're watching the factors of the jhanas go by. You're watching the Brahmaviharas go by. And so he says, I say, bhikkhus, that craving too has a proximate cause. It does not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for craving? It should be said, feeling. So as I just mentioned, feeling is really just that bare sensation that arises based on contact. It is just the experience of seeing. Seeing is feeling, hearing is feeling, tasting is feeling, smelling is feeling, touching is feeling, and thinking is feeling. The contents of that is perception in terms of how one labels that experience. So that experience of seeing a tree in front of you and having that as a neutral feeling is a perception, and the seeing of that tree is perception. But the actual seeing of that, the vision of that, is feeling. For feeling, it should be said contact. So he's saying that contact is the proximate cause for feeling. Contact is a conjoining of the I, if we talk about seeing, the experience of the I consciousness, and the form. It's the initial stimulation of the I that gives rise to the experience of seeing. Then on top of that is the perception of whether that is pleasant, what one is seeing, unpleasant, or neutral. And then along with that, more perception in terms of labeling whether what one is seeing is a green color, is one seeing a tree, and so on and so forth. This is rooted in memory. This is rooted in previous choices and previous formations. So this contact is the initial stimulation of the sense receptors, of the 6 sense bases. So it says, for contact, the six sense bases. If you don't have the six sense bases, you won't have the initial stimulation, the initial contact. So for the six sense bases, name and form, or mentality, materiality. So mentality is made up of five aspects. You have contact, feeling, perception, intention, and attention. These can be understood as processes through the five aggregates. Contact arising through the form aggregate. Feeling arising through the feeling aggregate. Perception arising through the perception aggregate. Intention arising through the formation aggregate. And attention arising through the consciousness aggregate. So these faculties, these five faculties of mentality, are essentially just, you can think of them as the way through which feeling arises. So the way through which contact arises. So it's the mind aspect, the mind which gives rise to the experience of contact, which gives rise to the experience of feeling and perception, of intention and attention. And then the form itself is the actual physical four elements making up this form. If you understand it in modern terms, it is the four states of matter. It is the solid molecules, the liquid molecules, the gaseous molecules, and the plasma molecules that make up the different components of the body and everything that we experience in the way of form. And then for name and form, the proximate cause is consciousness. Now, there's two ways to understand this again. With everything in relation to dependent origination, there's the macro level and there's the micro level. On the macro level here, it's in reference to consciousness that arises at the point of conception and takes root into the womb. And then that consciousness gives rise to that name and form, to that mentality and materiality that starts to become developed in the form of existence, in the form of being. And it experiences the contact, feeling, and perception in its own way as it starts to develop the six sense bases through that mentality and materiality. On a micro level, consciousness is also understood to be the consciousness that arises dependent upon the sensory feelings and the mental experience. So there are the six types of consciousness. So this is the potential for that consciousness to be established through name and form, and then be experienced through the six sense bases and the contact and feeling and perception that arises through one or more of the six sense bases. So when you're experiencing that arising and passing away of consciousness, whether it's at the eyes or the ear or the nose or the tongue, you're starting to see the arising and passing away of those consciousnesses, those sensory consciousnesses. And then for consciousness, it says the proximate cause is volitional formations. Bhikkhu Bodhi chose to use the word volitional formations, but you can understand it to be as fettered formations, karmic formations that are fettered by craving, fettered by conceit, and fettered by ignorance. These formations are given rise because of ignorance, because of choices made in the past where there was craving that arose, where there was identification that arose, where there was personalizing that arose, and where there was ignorance, where there was no awareness of the Four Noble Truths in that moment. This gives rise to what is known as abhisankharas, which are karmic formations, or I would call them fettered formations. And so he says, I say, bhikkhus, that volitional or fettered formations too have a proximate cause. They do not lack a proximate cause. And what is the proximate cause for these formations? It should be said, ignorance. So ignorance here is in reference to not knowing and then not experiencing the Four Noble Truths. There is the experience of ignorance at the level of not knowing the path, not knowing the Dhamma, not being introduced to the Dhamma. That's one level of ignorance. Then after one experiences the path and starts to cultivate the path, there is the ignorance of not seeing the Four Noble Truths in every moment. And how does one see the Four Noble Truths in every moment? through mindfulness, through the 4 foundations of mindfulness, to being aware and understanding and investigating and seeing whenever some form of craving arises or some form of aversion arises, using the 4 right efforts, using the 6 R's to let go of that identification process, let go of that craving, let go of that aversion, and then experience that mundane nibbana at that relaxed step when one tranquilizes the formations. So when you see that there is craving arising, you are experiencing, well, when you see suffering arising, when you see that you have experienced some kind of mental pain or physical pain, and then the mind starts to identify with it, you see that there's craving arising. When you recognize that and you let go of that, and you come back to the mind and body and relax the formations, then you experience the 3rd noble truth, which is the cessation of that suffering, that mundane nirodha, that mundane nibbana. And how you're doing it is through the 4th noble truth of having understood the path, the Eightfold Path, and specifically using right effort, which is through the 6R process, to come to that experience of cessation of suffering. So the more you do this, what you are doing effectively is letting go of those fettered formations, which would have made you identify deeper, which would have made you then experience suffering on a deeper level. And by letting that go, you're replacing them with wisdom. Every time you see in that moment when there is attachment or aversion or identifying to an experience, and you let go of it, you are replacing that with those formations rooted in that experience, formations rooted in the experience of the 3rd and 4th noble truth. So essentially, through the 6R process, you're letting go of formations rooted in the 1st and 2nd noble truth and replacing them with the 3rd and 4th noble truth through right effort, through that process. And now the Buddha is going to go through the order from beginning to end. Thus, bhikkhus, with ignorance as proximate cause, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formations as proximate cause, with consciousness as proximate cause, mentality, materiality. With mentality and materiality as proximate cause, the 6 sense bases. With the 6 sense bases as proximate cause, contact. With contact as proximate cause, feeling. With feeling as proximate cause, craving. With craving as proximate cause, clinging. With clinging as proximate cause, being. With being as proximate cause, birth. With birth as proximate cause, suffering. With suffering as proximate cause, faith. With faith as proximate cause, gladness. With gladness as proximate cause, rapture. With rapture as proximate cause, tranquility. With tranquility as proximate cause, happiness. With happiness as proximate cause, collectedness. With collectedness as proximate cause, the knowledge and vision of things as they really are. With the knowledge and vision of things as they really are as proximate cause, disenchantment. With disenchantment as proximate cause, dispassion. With dispassion as proximate cause, liberation. With liberation as proximate cause, the knowledge of distraction. Just as bhikkhus, when rain pours down in thick droplets on a mountaintop, the water flows down along the slope and fills the cleft, gullies, and creeks. These being full, fill up the pools. These being full, fill up the lakes. These being full, fill up the streams. These being full, fill up the rivers. And these being full, fill up the great ocean. And so he repeats that whole process again. So too, with ignorance as proximate cause, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formations as proximate cause, consciousness. with consciousness as proximate cause, name and form, with name and form, or mentality, materiality as proximate cause, the six sense bases, with the six sense bases as proximate cause, contact, with contact as proximate cause, feeling, with feeling as proximate cause, craving, with craving as proximate cause, clinging, with clinging as proximate cause, being, with being as proximate cause, birth, with birth as proximate cause, suffering, with suffering as proximate cause, faith, with faith as proximate cause, gladness, with gladness as proximate cause, rapture, with rapture as proximate cause, tranquility, with tranquility as proximate cause, happiness, with happiness as proximate cause, collectedness, with collectedness as proximate cause, the knowledge and vision of things as they really are, with the knowledge and vision of things as they really are as proximate cause, disenchantment, with disenchantment as proximate cause, dispassion, with dispassion as proximate cause, liberation, with liberation as proximate cause, the knowledge of destruction. Any questions, comments?
This is a really, really wonderful sutta. And because we already familiar with, most of us, dependent origination, but not much of the other set around transcendent arising. And I think I would say it's the most important part is like between the birth and Sada, like faith. That has to be a trigger, because like sometimes it doesn't have, you don't realize the suffering as suffering. It's just going to be just go back and looping again, right? So my personal experience as well, that at one point I suffer a lot, and then at one point, wait a minute, it has to be a better way. And then I guess that's do you think is this a lot that paramis will be contributed? There might be some other factors as well. Can you please?
Yeah, you could say that they are karmic in nature at a certain point. And of course, there's the cultivation of the paramis and so on. But if you think about it in just this present life, where you have come across so much suffering in one way or another, at a certain point, you just get tired of it and you just want a way out. And some people get sort of bogged down with the search. So they're searching for something. And in that process also, there can be suffering because one hasn't found what one is looking for. It just doesn't satisfy one. And then one comes across the Dhamma, one comes across the experience of, finding out about the Buddha, finding out about the Dhamma. That is a very crucial step in this process. So without that, without the introduction of the mind to the Dhamma, then there can't be the potential for faith to arise. So yes, there is the cultivation of the paramis and the karmic nature of that whole process. So it can be that a being could experience suffering and then not having been introduced to the Dhamma in one life, takes rebirth in another life, doesn't get introduced to the Dhamma in that life, takes rebirth in another life, and so on, until finally, in some way, they are introduced to the Dhamma. So that's a very crucial step, to be introduced to the teachings. And then there is a choice at that process, whether one wants to continue and then investigate and then make the effort to actually practice and then build up that faith, that Sādha.
Thank you so much. That's part of the very, important, especially for the people around you who has the common, a relationship with you, like for example, kids and stuff, for us to introduce to the Dhamma, I would say. Thank you so much, Delson. It's really wonderful.
Thank you, Delson, for a very interesting talk. I wonder if you can comment more on, I guess I have two questions. Like the first one is the practical one, the craving that arises when someone experiences jhana, that I'm experiencing jhana, I'm now at this level, I am progressing or I am not progressing. How does one work through that or let that go? Because there's also the, I need to stop trying so hard, I need to relax. So, it's hard to escape. It's hard to escape the I, when you're practicing and it's like, oh, I'm doing it again, I have to laugh at myself, and it's like, oh, it feels like inescapable. I feel like I am that crazy person who keeps repeating the same thing with the same outcome. I'm like, that I is just stuck. I feel stuck there.
Yeah, it's ironic. You try to relax instead of actually relaxing. Like you need to relax rather than just actually relaxing. And that process is a matter of stopping, just taking a pause at that point. You have to have the mindfulness or the recognition enough of seeing that mind is trying to do something. You don't try to do something. It's, again, going back to, the great Jedi Master Yoda. There is no try. There is just do or do not, right? So if you're trying to do something, in that process of trying, there's an I am going on there. There's an I am trying to relax. I am trying to stop trying too hard. All of this, you have to just stop. Like, if it helps just to say stop in the mind and allow the mind to then just dissipate all of those thoughts, and in that process experience that relaxation, and then come back to understanding how loving kindness just arises because of the right causes and conditions. The jhanas arise because of the right causes and conditions. You're not producing the jhanas. There is effort there, but it's just like little intention of effort that you're putting in, and then watching how everything unfurls, how everything unravels. So if you come at it with the attitude of, let's see what happens in your meditation practice, and then you're experiencing the jhana, you're experiencing the loving kindness come about, and you're experiencing the first, second jhana. And then you see the mind identifies with it and says, I am in this jhana now. And then it has this pride in being in this jhana. When you see that, you're no longer in the jhana, actually. So when you can recognize that, let go of that, and then come back and say, just relax, just relax that, and then come back to the feeling of loving kindness and allow things to unfurl again. If you take it from that attitude of a spectator, that attitude of just being the audience to the mind, rather than letting yourself identify with the mind and trying to do something with that effort, you're going to progress much better.
Okay, I will try. I will do the more spectator approach. Okay.
Yeah, just watch, just observe. Yeah.
And the second question I had was trying to find I'm not even sure how to ask this, like the right balance around sensual pleasures, or when does it become attachment? Like you used the example of food, right? But my understanding is, like the monks follow a much stricter approach to sensual pleasures, right? Than the Buddha. The Buddha didn't have the same expectations of the laity, right, around sensual pleasures. On the one hand, on the other hand, I think I understand how sensual pleasures are, lead to attachment and suffering in the long run anyway, right? So like, how does one balance the, like I'm not a monk, right? But also sensual pleasures are still a trap, right? Like what's the you know, like I really like strawberry ice cream, and you know, sometimes I feel like, is that really suffering to say that I like strawberry ice cream? That's the only flavor that I'll have, you know? You know,
Yeah,
just to use a mundane example, but I like mundane
yeah,
examples because you can just build up
yeah.
from that.
So let's use that example of strawberry ice cream, right? You really enjoy strawberry ice cream. You go to the shop and you're really looking forward to the strawberry ice cream, and they no longer have that flavor available at that shop. What's your reaction in the mind? Is the mind irritated by that? And if the mind is irritated, then you know there is some kind of craving attached to it.
Mhm.
That's what you have to recognize. What are your mental reactions to when things arise which you don't want, or when things don't arise when you want them to arise? So this want is not the issue. The issue is more about what is your reaction to that present moment. So if the present moment says that there is no ice cream available at that shop, does the mind recognize the irritation and then is able to let it go and then come back to a more balanced state of mind? Or, you know, ideally no irritation arises and you just say, okay, this is reality as it is. I'm seeing the reality as it is. There's no ice cream there. Maybe I can go to a different shop or something like that. The third alternative is one craves for it, one has irritation and causes oneself mental suffering. So the best way to recognize is just to come back to seeing how you're reacting to situations. It's not about letting go of your sensual pleasures. I mean, if your sensual pleasures are wholesome, it's not important to let them go. It's important to observe and understand how the mind responds, and what are the reactions to those situations. The more you're able to recognize this and let the negative reactions go and replace them with a smile, replace them with relaxing, replace them with tranquility or the other enlightenment factors, or replace them with the Brahma Viharas, the more you're following the path.
Okay, so let me make sure I understood this. I think I get it. So I really, really do love strawberry ice cream, just to be clear. I don't need anything else. So I go to a shop, and it has happened where, like, right? So if I start cursing the world and the gods because there's no ice cream, rah, 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 that would say, okay, that's obviously I'm creating misery for myself, you know, very, very clear.
Right.
Even if there's some disappointment, I can recognize, okay, I'm having this reaction to ice cream. If I say, well, so that's one scenario. The other scenario, there's no ice cream, and I say, well, there's no ice cream here. I still want some. I'll just go to another shop. Very calmly, just go to another shop. Just wanting to keep finding it, you know, that itself is not craving. It's just like, you know, I want ice cream. There's nothing bad with strawberry ice cream, and you know, and that's not suffering. The suffering is my reaction to if I don't get it, or
Yeah.
if I do. And if you know, maybe the next one has it and I'm like, oh, hooray, I have it and I really enjoy it. And so just enjoy it. But if it's like, oh my God, everything has to be strawberry and I want more and more and let me have 3 more scoops, like, then that's when I also need to step back and observe the craving, the attachment to this pleasurable experience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's not the, you know, you could want strawberry ice cream, want your favorite foods. It's like, what happens when you get it? What happens when you don't get it? Is the where you need to focus. Is that how to think about it?
So now let's just use that example a little further so it's better illustrated. So let's say that you do find, well, you don't, in the initial steps, you don't find the strawberry ice cream in the first shop. So maybe your mind doesn't get aversive towards it. If it did get aversive towards it, it would, you know, have hatred and anger and frustration and so on. And if you just calmly say, okay, there's no strawberry ice cream, and I'll go to the next shop. You go to the next shop. You have the strawberry ice cream, right? And you order, maybe you order like a large amount of strawberry ice cream, and you eat it. But then you crave for it and you want more of it, you want more of it. And now you're going to cause yourself physical misery. You're going to cause yourself a sugar rush and the physical components of that. So the craving in there is this attaching to it and wanting more of it. Rather than understanding you have this in the present moment, and when it's gone, it's gone. The ice cream arose and the ice cream passed away. The craving arises when you stick to an ice cream when it has passed away, right? You say the ice cream is gone and now you want more of it. That wanting more of it after it's passed away causes the craving, clinging, being, and suffering. Okay.
But having 2 scoops is okay. After that, the more and more and more is the that's the problem.
Exactly.
I'm very attached. I'm very attached. Okay. In all seriousness, thank you. I appreciate it, because I know it's a mundane example, but always I try to make sense of the, I like it, I don't like it mind. And I'm like, okay, just make sure I have a subtle understanding of what that really means, for everyday practice and, being a lay person. So yeah. Thank you for.
And I will just add one more thing to it. You can make that process a meditative process. When you're eating the ice cream, notice where the mind is in relation to eating that ice cream. So using the 4 foundations of mindfulness, not paying attention only to the flavor and how the taste arises, but paying attention to what happens in the mind and how it's moving in relation to whether it's craving for more of it, whether it's identifying with it, and so on. So you can make it a process where you practice mindfulness in that enjoying of the ice cream as well.
Okay. All right. So, so when I'm enjoying the ice cream, I can see where mindfulness is important, because if I'm eating the ice cream and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's finishing. I hope the shop is still open, or maybe I should go get some more. Now I'm not in the present moment anymore, with my ice cream. Now my mind is in somewhere else. Or if I'm eating my ice cream, I'm thinking, I can't believe that other shop didn't have it. They should be stocked up properly, blah, 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 blah. And instead of enjoying, my ice cream scoop, my mind is somewhere else. So even to enjoy pleasures, or just to have pleasures, I would still need some kind of mindfulness in that moment. So my mind is not running to what's coming next or what happened before, and just be, with this. Okay. All right.
Ultimately, you want mindfulness 24/7, but of course, step by step, and then eventually it just becomes automatic. The reason why you want that mindfulness is because you are exercising your mind to be able to do the 6R process if you need to. So mindfulness is there as a process of seeing how the mind moves, seeing the arising and passing away of thoughts and things and situations in relation to whatever it is you're doing, and then seeing and recognizing if there's that craving or aversion, as you put it, thinking about why did that store not have the ice cream, or, I hope the store still has more ice cream, and all of those different thoughts. If you recognize and let go of that, come back to the experience of the ice cream, come back to seeing that the mind, how it's responding to that flavor of the ice cream and so on. Then that also, now we're using the mundane example of ice cream, but if you can bring this to anything that you're doing in the way of walking, sitting, driving, writing an email, taking a shower, whatever it is, the more you do this, the easier it's going to be for you in meditation, in actual sitting meditation.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it for clarifying things for me.
Definitely.
Hi, Delson. I have a question.
So,
In jhana, you can't contemplate. Am I correct?
yeah, first we have to understand what you mean by contemplate.
That means what are the things arising in your mind that doesn't come off.
It can. If you're doing a jhana with open awareness, where your mind is collected but not absorbed, then you can see anything that arises in the way of the factors of the jhanas, in the way of what enlightenment factors are present, the experience of the Brahma Vihara, whatever your object of meditation is, or if you notice that a hindrance has arisen. When the hindrance arises, you know you're no longer in jhana. You use a 6-hour process and come back, and then come back into a more jhanic state. But if you're absorbed, you won't be able to know what other states are present within that jhana. If your mind is collected but not absorbed, if it's open and watching and just observing, then it can notice that there might be thoughts in the background, and those thoughts are fine. They'll just go away on their own. Then it might notice that there is present joy. It might notice there is present tranquility. It might notice there is present, a mind that is energized, and so on and so forth. So it's important to have the mind open enough to be able to notice the different states that are arising and passing away.
Okay. That's one question. Other question is, I feel sometimes the big white color things covers me, and after that I feel I am getting attached to that or something like that. That comfort or something. After that, my mind doesn't move. What I should do in that particular situation?
Yeah. It sounds to me, well, when your mind doesn't move, are you able to notice other things going on, or no? Or the mind is just not doing anything at all? When you are in that state, I'm asking you, when you're in that state where the mind isn't moving at all, are you noticing anything arising or passing away, or is the mind just still? There's nothing going on at all. You're not able to see anything else.
Nothing going on at all.
So it means the mind became too absorbed at that point, because that field of light that you're experiencing, whatever it might be, the mind got attached to it and became absorbed into it. So when you notice that the mind starts to attach to it, that's when you need to recognize and let go of that attachment through the 6-hour process, and then come back to the experience of observing whatever your initial object of meditation is. So if you started off with compassion, and then the mind started to experience this white light or whatever it might be, and then it stops, you need to recognize that there was attachment there, use a 6-hour process, and come back to compassion. If the mind goes from compassion then to joy or to equanimity, and then you notice that you were in a state of equanimity, but then the mind stopped moving because it became too absorbed, you have to recognize that, come back to the equanimity. There's a difference here. There is the absorbed state where nothing is happening because the mind is unable to see what's going on. And there is a state where nothing is happening because the mind is in a level of nothingness, the state of nothingness. There can still arise certain things. This level of nothingness arises because the mind is no longer outwardly projected. It's no longer thinking about things in the outside realm. It's more collected towards the internal experience. So there might be things that still arise in the way of formations and perceptions and things like that. So long as you can see those, then you know the mind is still open. Of course, you want to still have the perception of nothingness. You don't want to have the mind so still that there's no perception of nothingness. There's no perception of what's going on. So if you notice this, you need to let go. You need to relax. You need to use the 6 hours. You have to relax and loosen up your focus, because the mind becomes too focused. Loosen up your attention and your awareness. Open it up, broaden it up, and then start to see how the mind starts to move back to whatever your object was.
Okay. Thank you, Delson. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, yeah, Delson, and thank you, Homero, for your experience sharing, which I do actually have very similar, and I would like to further ask on just the ice cream example, right? For example, I'm enjoying that, and I do have an experience that I'm quite like, even though we are not craving for it, when we are enjoying it, like the enchanted enjoyment in their moment of like having it has been staying. Like it's not asking more, but it has been an experience so impactful that I do actually sometimes bring it up as a imagery to start my kindness to myself. So that experience is so impactful that enjoyment of that particular moment of the enchantment. Should we be like more aware of that right now? Like if I am having certain things that I really get enchanted into, that is another craving, right? Sometimes I get very enchanted into part of the nature, like is experiencing, which is also similar to that enchantment that I had, that experience of that very like ice cream feeling. I love ice cream, and I really resonate with what Homer was saying, and I'm actually, it's not, I know that my body should not, and I cannot have that that sugar and sweetness as often now. So I sometimes want it, but I still like going back to that deep enchanted feeling of that ice cream experience. So our learning is here. I just want to make sure that I'm doing it right, is that to be more aware of this thing is coming up again, right? This is me, that I'm liking that ice cream so much, that thing keep coming back to me. And when I have that particular moment, that if I have that chance to have that ice cream again, I'm taking small portion, but I enjoy it so much. I really enjoy it, but it's just that enjoy and let go. So this is the way to approach it. Is that right? Because this is also my drawback there on food particularly, yeah, and on certain things that happens if I started to like, yeah. So
yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you have explained it, but yeah, I just want to make sure that it's the knowing that I'm already indulged. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or I still can enjoy.
Yeah, so what you have to understand, just to clarify, is in that process of eating ice cream, let's say we use the word enjoying, it's not about indulging in the ice cream. It's not identifying with the ice cream. When I talked about being in the present moment, it's not in reference to the flavor of the ice cream alone in terms of how it tastes and so on, and the experience of tasting that ice cream and the experience of scooping up the ice cream and so on and so forth. It's in relation to how the mind is processing that. So what you have to notice is not in enjoying it in the sense of I am enjoying it, but in the sense of how is the mind responding in reference to, is it indulging in it? Is it identifying with it? Or is it just watching the body consume ice cream? Is it watching the experience of tasting happening, the experience of the flavor of ice cream being experienced? So if the indulgence is there, that indulgence is the craving. The indulgence here being in that process, the mind then starts to spiral into proliferation about that ice cream in that moment. But what you have to notice is you are satisfying, I mean, this is not obviously a bodily need. The body doesn't need ice cream, but for whatever reason, the body, started growing accustomed to the ice cream. But what you have to notice is how that want is being satisfied and how the mind becomes content because of it. But it should not be dependent upon the flavor and the taste. What you have to understand is how the mindfulness, meaning how the mind moves in relation to that experience. Is it identifying? So if you are identifying and indulging, then you know you're getting into craving. But if you're noticing that the mind is, so instead of having the words like I am enjoying, instead of having the words like I am indulging, instead reframe your perspective, reframe it in such a way that the mind is observing that there is consumption of ice cream happening, that the body is taking in the ice cream, that the flavor of ice cream has arisen, this taste of sweetness has arisen, and so on. The more you make things impersonal in that way, the easier it will be for you to see it as an impersonal process, and the more difficult it will be for the mind to personalize it and then indulge in it and then crave for it. So it's a matter of reframing your perspective on how the experience is being felt. So if the experience is being felt in such a way that I am experiencing it and I'm liking it and now I want more of it, then you can recognize, backtrack, and let go with the 6R process. But if you're seeing that the mind is enjoying the ice cream and in that moment there is this taste, this very pleasant taste and so on, and then the mind moves, you see the mind starting to move from the present moment, you bring it back to the awareness of what's happening in relation to the body, to sensations, to your mind, to the perception of that flavor and so on. You make it into a meditation. You're making that whole process into a meditation by using the 6R process in that way.
Okay, I think I got you. Thank you. Yeah, it's the switch of the way of looking at the scenario. It's like it's a taste contact with that perception and that consciousness of the connection of that taste, and then there goes my not clinging onto it. So the moment is to see that taste consciousness happening and non-craving onto it. So that 5 aggregate is in work, and that we are not us there to just to watch it. Okay, I think I kind of like get a better yeah. Thank you so much, Delson. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll just add to that since you mentioned that. So it's basically like this, like you're experiencing the flavor of the ice cream, right? The mind is experiencing it, or the ice cream hits the tongue. There's the contact. There's the sensation or feeling of that ice cream being tasted. And there's a perception that this is good. This is a good flavor. This is a good taste. This is strawberry flavor or whatever it might be. That's okay in the sense of observing that. But if you notice that the perception rather is, I really like this ice cream because it tastes good, then you know that now you're getting into identifying. So notice how the mind personalizes or doesn't personalize in relation to the things that you're doing in every day.
Maybe I could make it a bit practical, if I may.
Yes, please.
What I have been doing for years is to imagine, if I'm enjoying something, how would I respond if someone would take it away? How would my reaction be if someone grabbed that ice cream? Could I be glad? Oh, sure, enjoy it too. Or are you annoyed or angry? Hey, that's my ice cream. Get away from it. Buy your own ice cream and things like that. Whatever it may be. And then you will start to see that you might walk in nature, and that's a very nice experience. But when you go home, you might have a satisfied feeling. That was nice, and there is no attachment. It's just enjoying the present moment. And that's a very different feeling, but I think you have to practice it a bit to really start to see the difference between pure enjoying the moment or really identifying with it. I want to keep it, I want to prolong it, I want more of it, I want it more often, things like that. And if you start to practice it, like I said, imagining someone would instantly take it away, how would your mind respond? So just as a tip, maybe.
Thank you, Sylvia.
That's wonderful.
That's,
that's wonderful. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much again, Delson and Sal, and very delicious example. So I think we are up to the hour, and let's share some merit. Thank you. Right. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisitions of all kinds of happiness. May being inhabiting space and earth, Devas and Nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Delson.
Thank you
Thank
Thank
very
you,
you,
everyone.
much.
Delson. Thank you, Kin.
It was
Thank you,
great.
Delson and Kin.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Delson.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Take
Thank
care,
you, everyone.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you,
Take care.
everybody, for asking questions.
Yeah.
Also for answering so nicely.
Absolutely.
See